Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Jeff from Hard to Come By.
And this is Shelby from Shelby's Comics.
And this is episode 3. We're talking about Whitman variants today. All right, I love that intro, man. Shelby's a whiz at all this stuff, so if you ever need any help, shout out to Shelby here for being the master. Not only is he a historian of comics, he does all kinds of graphic stuff. So
a little bit.
All right, so I guess the first thing we're going to do is that we talked a little bit about a recap of what we talked about last week. So last week we obviously talked about going direct. And that was over on Shelby's channel. Again, if you're watching this on the replay, I'll send the link up there for you so you can see that video as well. Actually, now that I said that, all right. Wild Comics, how's it going, man? We got Just a Rican in here. We got Mr. Taz, Matthew Fox. Thank you all for joining us today. Shelby, what's going on, man? How's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, what's up? Just a Rican. I was just talking to you. Mr. Taz, you and I have been talking today. Hey, Wild Comics, I was just thinking about you because I actually, I think I got some stuff I need to send you that's set aside. But yeah, we can talk. Yeah, man, it's been a week. So that's all I can say.
Yeah, we had a lot going on, a lot of live events, both of us. So it's been a lot of fun. So what from last week? What kind of updates or what kind of comments have you gotten?
Really not much, except for people just really liking last week. I've had a couple of people comment about they love the history. They love that we're going through the history. There's a lot of young, and I mean that in a relative sense to me being old. There's people whom's, when I think of, when I think of buying comics as a kid, I'm thinking 70s and 25-cent books, is what I mainly remember, where these people buying as kids, they're thinking 90s and Image Comics and stuff like that. So a lot of those people have commented that they really like hearing the history of, how we got to where we are today. And I showed this on one of my videos this past week. Phil Suling was, basically responsible for creating the direct market.
Yep.
And in Vampirella number 25 that came out in 1973, is an editorial by Phil Suling in here. This is because in 1973, he was actually arrested for selling indecent comics at one of his conventions in New York.
Really?
A vendor was selling Zap comics, the Crumb books.
Yep.
And, he was arrested along with 2 teenage girls who were running his front table for him.
Scandalous.
And so Warren gave him the opportunity to tell his story about that. So definitely one of the episodes I'm working on is censorship in comics. I feel like that's an important part of our history. Last week I was in the LCS and I'm looking at the racks of comics, and granted it's on the top shelf, but I'm seeing things like Maniac of New York.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have that freedom to be able to choose what it is that we purchase today and what publishers choose to publish if it weren't for some of these people that went through the things that they did. And so I think the idea of the direct market and censorship kind of goes hand in hand. So, yeah, hopefully some people will be interested in that. And it's a program I'm working up right now. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, like you said, that goes right into what we were talking about with the market going direct and that whole boom. You had the underground comics that were coming up around that time. The comic shops were opening up, and part of the reason or the benefit of that is they were able to have more adult-oriented comics. They weren't just geared towards kids. You know, they were able to do a lot more, have more flexibility, charge a little bit more. And like you said, that all kind of goes together during that time. And then you go into the seduction of the innocents and all that, and the whole Comic Code Authority. So yeah, that'll be a great episode. So that's gonna be another good one. The only update I got from this one is Max had mentioned on the chats there that she does a lot of the digital comics, and I've always kind of like been against the digital comics, you know. And I started thinking about it a little more. I'm like, well, obviously I have a limited supply back there. I have so much room. There are a whole bunch of runs there. You know, I don't really want to go buy all the issues of it, but it'd be kind of cool to read them. So I actually signed up for the Marvel Unlimited. I think it was only, I forgot, it was like $10 a month or something like that. Right. So the cost like one comic book, and I've already read like a ton of Spider-Man issues I probably never would have bought. You know, I'm reading those stories, and they've got, I think, 20,000 comic books on there that you can go back and read. And the experience actually is kind of cool. The way they set it up and your eyes move across the page. So I'm actually, I'm not going to give up, obviously, printed comics, but I've kind of embraced the digital side a little bit more than I might have in the past.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but I know that Marvel Unlimited, if you sign up for a year, I think it's only $99 or something, and usually you get a free gift. Like I remember one year, whenever the Ultron movie came out, they gave away a little Ultron statue.
Oh, that's cool.
You get a year subscription.
They didn't give me anything.
Nothing. Okay. Well, they used to anyway.
Right.
But
back in the day,
2015.
Okay. So we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about some Whitman comics right now.
I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to hear what you've put together here, man.
Well, let's see if I can share the screen right. I had some technical difficulties the other day. I forgot to hit the go live button last time. So I was talking with my guest, Dean from Legendary Display. You can see that episode. And we talked for a good 12, 15 minutes before my wife comes in and she shows me a screen. She goes, "You're not live." It's like, oh my God.
That's funny.
I did the countdown, I did everything, and I forgot the go live button.
Yeah, I saw you drop that video. I haven't watched it yet. So
yeah, so we're talking about the history of Whitman comics. Is it the first variant? Are they reprints? There's been a lot of misinformation. It's a lot of confusing facts that are out there. And granted, during that time, it was kind of confusing. It was the Wild West of comics, and people were doing whatever they wanted to and whatever people can get money for. If Marvel or DC can get money, they're going to do it. Whatever you need to do, and we'll figure it out later kind of thing. So going through that, of course, we need to know the origin story. And what better origin?
You're going to start up nice and easy. You're going to see 10% thrust capacity, chief lift. And 3, 2, 1.
I love that. All right, so going back, Whitman has been around for a long time. It's obviously a subsidiary of Western Publishing Company. And you actually did a really good video talking about the Big Little books. Yeah. So that's when they really kind of started back in 1932. And do you want to go into the little Big Little books? I mean, I'll put a link up there for you, but just talk about it real quick.
Well, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. Back in the 1930s, early 40s, Whitman put out what was called Big Little books, and and why they called them that is obvious. And on the side, it says Whitman Big Little Book. But Whitman at that time, or you could almost say Western Publishing, they did a lot of licensing to TV shows and things like that. So if you look at the things that they put out on the back, you can see like Dick Tracy, Bonanza, Flipper, one of my favorite TV shows as a kid, Lassie, Tarzan, Tom and Jerry. but they were all set up the same way. Is you usually had a little bit of a story on one side and then an image on the other. Now, what is interesting is a lot of the times Walt Disney was pretty stingy about their artwork, but a lot of times I know with like the Marvel, they did a Spider-Man, they did a Fantastic Four. They actually had in-house artists that ghost arted, looking at other people's work, like John Romita Sr. and stuff. So they weren't the actual Marvel artists that did the art, but they were ghost artists through the Western publishing house. And then, of course, they made their own story up and stuff. You couldn't find those stories in comics. But yeah, just neat little history. And I remember growing up with these and really enjoying them. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing those around, and I remember seeing those in like antique stores and everything. And I was actually just looking up some of the values of those. They're actually worth a good bit of money too, if you can find certain ones. I mean, if you see them in an antique store, check them out because they're actually worth a little something. And then I remember the coin side of it, because I remember my grandparents were they weren't coin collectors, but they had a bunch of coins, and the Blue Book U.S. coins, they had that all over the place. So I remember seeing that book a lot growing up. Because they really were known as, that coin and stamp collecting is really what they were kind of known for, and then they got into, coloring and activity books, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But really they started being kind of comic adjacent for a while, and then they really dove into it with really publishing and doing some of that, storytelling and artwork for like Dell Comics, right?
Well, Dell was its own company, and Whitman Publishing
They printed it
and distributed their comic books for Dell. But again, Western Publishing had its own in-house art department and stuff, and they were putting these things out under the Whitman label. And so in the mid-'60s, like you're showing here on your timeline, 1962, what Western decided to do was, why don't we just publish our own books?
Right. Why pay Dell this money and everything when we can do it ourselves?
Yeah. And so they formed Gold Key Publishing, and they stole a lot of the artists from Dell, brought them over. They got a lot of the licensing properties, except for Walt Disney. I don't think they never got no, it was Looney Tunes. They wasn't able to get Looney Tunes. They did end up getting Walt Disney, which was a big blow to Dell. And Dell just ended up floundering and then going out of business in the early 70s. Yep. So a lot of people will use Dell and Gold Key and Western synonymously, but they're really not. Dell was a separate company that was strictly published and distributed by Western. Western then formed Gold Key, and it forced Dell out of business because they had to look for a whole new distributor. Plus, a lot of their art departments and writers were taken. And so it's really kind of a sad story if you think about it. But,
right. It was a cutthroat world, with any business.
It was. But then Gold Key only lasted another 10 years. So
yeah, they weren't around that long. I mean, people see Gold Key everywhere, but they weren't around all that long. I mean, that actually could be a good episode we do all by itself, which is Gold Key, because there's some really cool Gold Key comics out there.
I have a huge Gold Key collection, probably 3 short boxes, because I love photo covers. And so I have a whole bunch of Gold Key photo covers.
Yeah, you might hear my phone go off. There's an eBay listing coming up in about 20 minutes that I wanted to get, so I want to make sure I get that too. So, and that's for a Whitman Gold Key comic. So pretty cool. But yeah, just going through again the timeline a little bit more. Obviously we talked about Gold Key. They're doing the color and activity books, and we'll talk about that in a second more. But when we talk about the distribution side of it and how these Whitman variants and 3-packs were coming out, they really used their distribution that they had for Gold Key and for the color and activity books. Were in a lot of places comics weren't sold. So that's how they were able to get a lot of this stuff. But obviously in 1977, we know they kind of took over some publishing for DC Comics. And then they didn't publish, actually, as far as I know, they only published one Marvel comic. And I think it was like a larger trade book, but it wasn't, they didn't do any other Marvel. So they distributed Marvel, they published DC, they have the famous 3-packs that everyone kind of knows of. And they did a lot of that business. They really were considered the first direct, company, if you want to call it. If you're looking at the distribution model for Marvel and DC and everything, especially Marvel selling to all the independent distributors that we talked about. And now Whitman comes along and says, I'll buy directly from you. I'm going to bypass them. I'm going to put these in 3-packs. And I'm going to sell them to a different group for the most part. So just sell to me direct. Eventually, they end up selling to the comic book stores as well. So we'll talk about that in a minute. They stopped all that in 1980. Some things I hear 1981, but it seems to be 1980. And then for some odd reason, 1984, a show pops up. There's a Canadian price variance 3-pack set that came out with the licensed Walt Disney characters that was produced in 1984, which is kind of after they did a lot of their stuff. So that's kind of an interesting thing that popped up there. So again, Whitman was both a publisher and a distributor. So there could be some confusing things of what we call them. If the ones we typically think about Whitman with the blank box on the bottom left where the UPC goes, a lot of people say that's a Whitman one. But Whitman, like as you see in the DC Super Friends up there, that's actually published by Whitman. It has the Whitman logo on the book because they had the strong presence and those other retail outlets. DC felt like it benefited them a lot more to put the Whitman logo on there to get that trust from people that bought, because they were used to buying Gold Key comics and Whitman comics and coloring books from there. So they decided to go that route. Marvel did not. So when you say Whitman variant, which one are we talking about and what's the right way to kind of call it? So kind of get into that. So the DC side of it, do you want to go into the DC side?
No, I think you probably know a little more about this than I do. I was just going to show this. So I don't have very many 3-packs left. I did have some of the Star Wars in my collection. I sold them about 6 months ago. But this is the Black Hole. Came out in late 70s, early 80s. This is a 3-pack. There you go. This is a 3-pack. You can see clearly the Whitman logo, but it does have the UPC at the bottom. Yep. So you cannot necessarily differentiate, well, if it has a Whitman logo, then it shouldn't have a UPC, because they did have UPCs on some of them. Now, that may have been a difference between Gold Key and DC. I don't think I've ever seen any DCs that had a Whitman logo and a UPC. But these, you'll also find Gold Key versions, right, where it has the Gold Key logo. But it clearly says, a Whitman product published or distributed by Western Publishing. So, yeah, these are the type of things we're talking about when we look at 3-packs. So,
yeah, and we'll show that in a little bit as well, because there was, in the beginning, like 1977, there was Whitmans were putting out those 3-packs of Marvels. They had the UPC code in there, so that's why there's some confusion where, is it considered a Whitman or not? Because it's got a diamond on there, but it has a barcode. So we'll talk about that in a second here. Looks like the old WWF logo.
WWF logo, yeah, I agree with you.
Vince McMahon has his hand in everything, So the Whitman variants for DC, they actually obviously published, the DC comics. Really about 8 titles is really what they published for them. Not a ton of keys as far as, what happened in those. There's a couple that we'll mention a little bit, but they had a whole bunch of different variety. There was no consistency really of what they were putting on there. So if you can see on the right-hand side there was at least 6 different logos that Whitman would put on there. They would have the barcode with the line through it saying it's a direct with the Whitman on there. Then we have just the Superman flying there. So there was a whole bunch of things that they were trying to do to try and figure things out. And they were just, like I said, they were kind of printing what they wanted to. They sold, through their regular distribution chain. And then they did end up selling, again, these to comic book stores. So comic book stores did end up getting some of these, Whitman packs in there. And especially later on, they started breaking the Whitman packs open and selling those individually to comic book stores as well. Because Whitman was just ordering so much. As sales were starting to slow down, they were backlogged. They had warehouses full of products. And that was one of the complaints people had about buying Whitman stuff, is you couldn't follow series a whole lot, because you get one issue and then like 3, 4, 5 months later, you might see the next one come out, someplace else, because they were just so chaotic and it wasn't a really streamlined process they were kind of going through there. But just have some of the comics down there, the run of Action Comics, Batman, Flash, DC Comics Presents, pretty much Wonder Woman, all the major ones you can think of, the 8 top ones, they were doing some kind of printing for.
Yeah, I think you made a really good distinction there, Jeff, is why aren't Whitman's maybe as well known as, say, the big boom currently with newsstand
Right.
Comics. And I think you hit it on the head there, is because there wasn't a lot of keys really put out that had the Whitman logo. I mean, trust me, I think you would hear a lot more about Whitman if there was a Hulk 181 Whitman out there,
Right.
or something like that, right? But you're right. There just was not a lot of keys that were in that Whitman run of comics. And we are talking about a fairly narrow window. I think 77 to
80, yeah.
1980, 79 or 1980. So a pretty small window in which Whitmans were put out. And then I think you're saying it here is that Whitmans were placed at areas that did not have a newsstand presence. So it wasn't necessarily comic shops, but it was like bus stations and, other places that did not have a spinner rack. So Whitman through Western Publishing, which distributed magazines also, were able to, take advantage of that by putting out their 3-packs into areas that didn't have a, spinner rack, really is what we're talking about.
Right.
And put it out with magazines. And so we're not necessarily talking about, when we're saying direct, we're not saying comic book stores.
Right. Yeah.
Although
the main
comic
key.
book stores could be.
Yes.
Could be. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The big key, I guess, on the direct side when we're talking about is Marvel and DC, or especially Marvel, they sold the comics directly to Whitman. They were non-refundable. Whitman could not return them back to them. And then Whitman distributed them to their already existing distribution channels they have, with the magazines that we're doing, with the coloring books and everything. There were activity books. They already had this distribution network that weren't currently selling comic books. So for them, it was a no-brainer. We already go there. We already service them. Let's give them some comics and see what happens. They were printing a ton of those comic books out there. But again, they weren't returnable. And that's what led to all that overstock they were having. Here's the one comic I was talking about, the Star Wars larger trade. That was published by Whitman. So that one is pretty hard to find. All the rest were pretty much done, distributed, the Marvel side distributed. And then because, again, we're going to have a whole video dedicated just to how Star Wars saved Marvel. Star Wars was so popular, that Whitman stopped doing everything else and they were only selling Star Wars products. So all the Star Wars, Whitmans you see out there, and that's why they're so plentiful. And they could be second prints, they could be reprints, they could be, fourth prints. All those Whitman and Cara, they just wanted them because it was so popular. They only bought Whitman for I think a year and a half. And that's all they were going for was Whitman 3-packs of Star Wars. That was the big thing. Depending on what source I was trying to read, I couldn't get a real gauge on the print run. But it looks like it's less than 5% of a print run, they were sending to Whitman to distribute in their channels. I don't know if you heard anything different, but it makes sense when I looked up some of the like eBay listings and some of the other auction sites I was looking at. When you kind of add all those up, the ones like say the Star Wars ones are regular, whether it's direct or newsstand versus a Whitman one, it's definitely less than 1% of those listed.
Yeah, definitely. Star Wars is just an anomaly for one, right? I mean, no one anticipated the popularity of the movie. Whitman and Marvel and then DC, just by a side effect, all got saved, so to speak, through the popularity of Star Wars. And there were millions of Star Wars books, especially the first 6, because that was the movie adaptation that was published. And then you can find a few Whitmans. I've seen a number 7 and number 9. I think I own them. Hey, Captain Beardo, how are you doing, buddy? But yeah. So here's a couple of Whitmans out of my collection. Whitmans can definitely be distinguished by what I call the symmetrical diamond. So it's usually a symmetrical diamond, unlike a direct comic, which is what I might call the squish diamond, and usually has the UPC struck out. So this actually goes back to what we were talking about, I think in the first episode, where all they really did was they replaced the black plate on the printer. So they were all still within the same print runs. They weren't reprints. It's just at a certain point in the print run, they took out the black plate that had the UPC code. And if you look at the normal comic book, this would have said still 25 cents. And then the issue number would have been over here in this corner. So that was a separate black plate, and they just took that black plate out and then put this black plate in, which did not have the UPC, put the name of the comic, Fantastic Four, and then they put the price and the issue number over the side. And you can actually see, you can see a little bit better on this one. Notice how they cut out by hand the black plate. You can see how it's off cut.
Yeah.
It's actually missing a little piece there. So it literally, you can tell how they cut out the black plate by hand just to put in, or in this case, cover up the still 25 cents or still 30 cents, whatever was there, in order to put in this new black plate to, have the Whitman diamond and the price, the issue number, the month, and then the title of the book over here. And then, of course, the blank UPC. And I think, and you may be talking about this, all Marvel did was kind of adopt the same thing when they started doing direct-only issues, because like we said, this is really a direct-only book, i.e. it wasn't on a newsstand. And so they just adopted something similar for their direct-only books post-Whitman.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They already had a large, direct customer. They just adopted what Whitman was doing. They liked the diamond, so they said they squished it down a little bit. They put it in there. And they said, okay, we've got a direct comic. And that's where some of the confusion of people saying, well, these are second prints. These aren't real ones. They're either the same as any other price variant or anything else that's out there. It's run the same time. It's stopped. They switch out a plate and they keep running it. And then along with the fact that sometimes the comics came out months later because of the distribution warehousing problem they had, people automatically assumed, oh, that's Whitman's or second prints. It came out months later. It looks differently. It's not the real thing. The confusion, it gets a little bit even more. I don't know if I can blow this up. Let me see if I can blow this up. A little bit.
You can blow it up. There you go.
If you see the Spider-Man in the top right corner of there, the first appearance of Black Widow, or Black Cat. Sorry, dog's barking. That one is the squish diamond with the UPC with the line through it in a Whitman 3-pack. So that's why sometimes if you look on eBay specifically and you type in Whitman variant, that issue will pop up and people say that's a Whitman comic. And that, in my mind, is not a Whitman comic. It was distributed, and Whitman was one of the buyers, one of the direct buyers of that particular comic. But that's not a Whitman variant. It was not made specifically for, Whitman didn't specifically make it. It wasn't made for them. It can be bought at any other comic book store, any other direct one you went to. But that's where you see some of that confusion when people are saying, well, that's a Whitman because it came in a 3-pack, in a Whitman 3-pack. You can clearly see it on there. But that is definitely not a Whitman product.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the large diamond under the Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man you see there as well. It's the large diamond. It looks like a Whitman. It's got the UPC in there. We don't know if that was in the 3-pack or not. Looks like it was. So there was just so many inconsistencies that they were doing. You don't know really what to call them. So in the immortal words of Michael Keaton,
do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
just a great scene.
That's a great thing.
Yeah. So Shelby, what would you call, the DC printed ones and the actual what we call Whitman variants with the diamond and the no UPC there? Do you distinguish one's called something different or not? I mean, what do you think?
I want to make life easy on myself and just call anything with the symmetrical diamond a Whitman, and then anything without the symmetrical diamond a non-Whitman. But I think just like you pointed out, where you see so many alternate versions, you could see the symmetrical diamond with UPC. You could see the squash diamond in a Whitman 3-pack. Then it's not that simple. So I've heard some people in my research say things like, well, there's really no such thing as Whitman because Whitman didn't necessarily choose how they wanted their books to look. They just wanted books to be able to put in 3-packs and sell on bookshelves, right? It was the printers that chose how they would do this. And this was done not just for Whitman, but if you cut out your thing inside the comic book and subscribed, say, to Amazing Spider-Man, guess what you would get? You would get this version of the comic book.
Get the subscription version with a nice crease down the middle of it.
With a nice crease and just wrapped in brown paper.
Right.
So it's really difficult to call them strictly Whitman variants or direct variants or subscription books. And I probably shouldn't use the word variant. I'll use the word edition. Whitman edition, subscription edition, and direct edition. Because they were used interchangeably.
Right.
So,
what about the DC ones? The ones that actually were printed by
Whitman? I would say for sure. if it has the Whitman logo on it, which this one doesn't. If it has a Whitman logo on it, yeah, it's most definitely then a Whitman. Marvels are hard to distinguish. And DC, was a little slow to adopt. Even when we look at early direct DCs, they're indistinguishable from newsstands. DC didn't come along and start changing the way their comic books looked for direct market until like 82 to 84, where Marvel was doing it in 79.
Yeah, it always seems like DC always does what Marvel does a few years later. Like they kind of catch up a little bit and they kind of join what Marvel does. They're always a few years behind.
Yeah.
The inconsistencies like we're talking about, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the screen here, but the Marvel's Greatest Comics with the thing on the top left up there. If you see it, it's got the 30-cent Whitman logo up the top there. But if you read the indicia in there, it actually says it's a 35-cent copy. So inside it says it's 35 cents. Cover says it's 30 cents. You've got them packing up different diamonds with the stars around it. The regular direct comics are put in there. So like I said, they were buying whatever they can get basically. So yeah, it is kind of hard to distinguish what is what. I kind of like the difference of saying the DC comics that were printed by Whitman are Whitman editions.
Right. That logo right there.
Yeah, and then the other ones would be a Whitman variant. I guess would make sense then to say that. But again, there is so many different ones in that.
Yeah, and I'll have to go look at some of my 30-cent variants now in my collection and see
what it says inside. It's pretty interesting.
Well, I know that those variants, what makes them variants is the price on the cover is different than the price in the indicia.
Yeah, they were testing it out, right?
They were doing testing, correct. But yeah, I'm a little curious now if maybe that might have been a side effect of this, right? That it's a Whitman or subscription or something like that type of anomaly versus something else. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So we'll go on to the next segment, which is everyone's favorite segment that we talk about. It's a little bit harder, again, with so many varieties of different variants and everything. But this is the Show Me the Money section.
I need to feel you, Jerry. Show me the money. Jerry, you better yell. Show me the money. Show me the money.
All right. We're going to talk about this next week on your channel. We're talking about newsstand versus direct. Again, that's the one that everyone's asking for. That's going to be the most controversial one. That's the one we're going to try and talk about and kind of expand your mind a little bit and maybe hear some things you
maybe blow your mind a little bit.
It might blow your mind. Who knows? We're not responsible for any minds blown. But getting Whitmans and really high grade is extremely difficult because of the distribution they were doing and the warehousing and how many hands it touched. So for one, that's hard. And for two, like we mentioned, there's not a ton of keys. They did all the big ones, like the Star Wars. Most of them are reprints that they did. Whether it says reprint on the top left or it'll say reprint on the inside of the cover. So again, make sure when you're looking for a lot of those Star Wars, and you see something on eBay, someone might not even open up the comic book and say it's a first print Star Wars. Make sure you have them take a screenshot of the inside page because it may be a reprint on there. So just something to watch out for. But
yeah, not all the reprints have reprint up there
right
in the top logo. Jeff showed me that, which I didn't know. I something I learned. He showed me one that had the Whitman diamond that didn't say reprint in the top corner, but then you open up to the indicia and it clearly says second print or reprint. I think it says.
Yeah. It says this is for originally printed in Star Wars comics or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So make sure you watch some of those. Trying to find some keys. If you can get a Whitman in a key in a high grade, that obviously leads to some big price tags that we're talking about. So a couple that I found, obviously Battlestar Galactica, which is just an awesome show. I never collected the comic book, but I love the show. If you look at on the same exact day, you had a 9.8 newsstand and a 9.8 Whitman, which again, hard to find a 9.8 Whitman. But both those were sold the same exact day. The newsstand was sold for $250 and the Whitman was sold for $315. Same exact day. So you got a 26% premium on a high grade Whitman versus a regular newsstand. So that's definitely something to kind of look out for. But again, not a ton of keys that we're looking at. Now, this one, I wasn't sure. I didn't look far enough back. This may have been the difference here because it's so large. It may have been when they announced Timothy Fox was going to be the new Batman. When they did that alternative reality Batman becoming, Lucius Fox's son became Batman. So I'm wondering if that was the reason why this one was so much greater, because it was sold a month earlier. So in January, you've got the Batman, Whitman one, which we know very limited print run on that. In a 9.4, again, high grade Whitman, was sold for $1,100. And then the newsstand was sold exactly a month later for only $360 in 9.4. So again, I don't know if the announcement when they said, Timothy Fox was going to be Batman came out in January, and then it cooled off by February. I didn't look at that as much, but that's such a huge thing. And really the keys and the price value seem to favor Whitman's in the DC ones. The ones that are actually printed by Whitman. Those ones I'm finding seem to have a little bit higher premium compared to regular ones. But again, there's not a ton of them out there, and I really think they are undervalued. When you look at the print run that they had, how they were distributed, how many there really were out there, and really what they meant to the history of comic books and really starting that direct market and expanding comic books into other areas. I really think they should be going for a little bit more. But again, with the not a ton of keys listed in that area, and the condition not being the greatest, I can see why they're a little bit lower. But like you said, if there was a Hulk 181 or a Spider-Man 129 Whitman variant, everyone would be talking about it. We would know it, just like we know Canadian price variants and Mark Jewelers and everything else on there. But that's all I got. What are your kind of final thoughts on that, Shelby?
Yeah, the reason why you and I started talking about this as an episode, when it was right when you and I first started making plans for this series, and Reggie Collects dropped a video that I believe the title was "Are Whitman's the Next Newsstand" or something like that.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
and I think, not getting into the details and the history that you and I just went into, his takeaway message was that you're looking at something that was a small window, 3 years. You're looking at something that has a low print run, right? So those are two check marks if you want to think of it as that, right?
Yeah.
In terms of rarity, small window in which it was published, to a small percentage as compared to something else, which in this case would be newsstand copies.
Right.
Third, using the same argument as they do for newsstands, which says newsstands have a higher opportunity to be mishandled and thus are more difficult to find in high grade. Well, Whitman has almost double or triple that, right? Because they're sent from the printer/publisher to Whitman. They are then hand put together into sets of threes,
as fast as they can,
as fast as they can, run through another machine that would put them into plastic bags. These plastic bags, I'll tell you, okay, having handled a lot of these plastic bags, they do not look how much bigger this plastic bag is than the comic book, okay? Throwing these plastic bags into boxes to be shipped out, it is not conducive to the condition of the comic book, okay? I mean, because you can have air that is held inside the plastic bag. The size of the plastic bag is bigger than the comic books. And trust me, they're going to try and pack as many of these in a box as they possibly can. So they're pushing them down. what I call burping bags to try to get the air out, so then you have that chance. Plus, then, they're sometimes hung on a rack. So hence the little hole that is punched out. And so people thumb through them just like action figures on pegs today. So there's just so much opportunity for these to be mishandled, and they're cheap. So they are being purchased to give to kids. Here, shut up. Here's 3 comic books. Go to your room. I heard that all the time. Shut up. Go to your room, Shelby. But anyway, so it's not like, newsstand copies, which may or may not, we'll get into that next episode, having the opportunity to be mishandled. These definitely were mishandled. So, yeah, I think if you want to use the same logic as with newsstands and the rarity, then, yeah, you're talking about something that could be rather special. But like you and I both have said, I think what really holds Whitman's back is there's just no keys really in that 3-year time period that really help distinguish them or make them set apart. Even with Mark Jewelers, we see the same thing. Is just a common Mark Jeweler, it might be a little bit more, but then you get a Mark Jeweler with a key in it. Now you got something special, so.
Yeah. If they would just lasted just a couple more years, I mean, I think that's really the main reason why we talk about Canadian price variants. That run they had in the mid 80s of Canadian price variants, all the big keys were coming out that time. So you had a lot of things people can kind of gravitate towards and look for things with a little bit smaller print runs, a little bit different variants, that made sense. But yeah, this one, there's not a whole lot. So again, I appreciate the people hanging out in the chats right now. I appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to this. We love nerding out about this. And Shelby, I say we do a giveaway. What do you think, people that are here?
I'd love to do a giveaway.
All right. I know you got one. I got one. I might have the same one as you. So, all right. Why don't you go for it?
I doubt it. I'm trying to think of it. I don't have a good trivia question. Oh, I meant to think.
I got a quick one I can do.
Go ahead.
All right. So, pop quiz. Let's see who's been paying attention. What year was those Whitman variants, the Marvel 3-packs, when were they started? So what year? And then we've got the same Fantastic Four.
Oh, no. Wow.
You were showing.
Look at that.
Of the Whitman. Plus, I got a little bit beat up copy, but you got Spider-Woman #2.
Oof.
Whitman variant as well. Pass Point, how's it going, brother? I appreciate you stopping by.
Oh.
No. Captain Beardo.
1977. All right.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. You know how to get a hold of me. I'll get these out to you. Matthew, so close, though. So close. All right, what do you got, Shelby?
Matthew just hit Matthew tried to hit the broad, the broad bit there.
Yeah, he has select Tourette's where he shouts out different names and everything. So maybe he was just shouting things out like that.
All right. So what I'm giveaway is a couple of Big Little books. So I'm giving away a Tom and Jerry and a Bugs Bunny.
That's
maybe,
awesome.
Yeah, maybe you want these, maybe you don't. They're not in great condition, but they're still about $10 each. Books.
That's history. That is history.
And it's history. It's history. Yeah. I mean, someone has enjoyed writing their name on it. So you can I can't read their name, but you can let them know that we have their book and they wanted to make sure their crayons worked. So, but yeah, it's a cool little thing to have. So these are both Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny. And I mentioned this earlier. What were these cartoons known as? whenever we'd see them.
You didn't know there was going to be a quiz at the end of this, did you guys?
Yeah.
You might have to give him a hint too. We gotta wait for the lag though.
What brands were these known as? Yeah, that's it. Looney Tunes. All right, Passport.
Look at that.
Send me your information over on IG, and I will ship these out to you, my sir. I think all my info is down there in the description. So yeah, so just hit me up over on IG. I don't think I know you personally, and I will send these out to you.
Passport's a good guy. Even though he gets kicked out of a lot of places, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy. Okay, I've been kicked out of towns before. Okay,
well, that's a whole episode on its own, right there.
That is. Hey, one thing I wanted to show. This is a Mark Jeweler that I just picked up this week. I think it's the only one in my collection. Look up there. Can you see it?
No, is that a store print? What is that? Oh, is that the diamond?
That is one of the star stamps.
Yeah.
So I got very lucky and found this, and the person, I mean, I hardly noticed it till I was looking at the pictures, and it's like, wait a minute, that's a star stamp copy, which are so much harder to find. And yeah, I swiped this up for a really good price this week, so I was very happy with that.
That's another piece of history on that, and kind of shows, like we talked about, that was on a military base. It was stamped to say someone bought it from there, and there it is, the Mark Jeweler. Very cool. Yeah. Did you see the trailer for Shang-Chi? Now you mentioned that.
Oh my God! I think I peed a little, but I'm not sure if it's due to the trailer or me just being old. But I think it might have been due to the trailer. That looks so good.
That looks really, really cool. I'm sure I didn't look, but I'm sure like Master Kung Fu 115, was it the Death Dealer or what's his name? I forgot. Help me on the chat. What was the villain's name again in that? Is it Death Dealer or Death something is his first appearance in there? And then the Blades, which is like issue 56. I forgot his name too. But I'm sure those comics are blowing up right now. There were always speculation that they were going to be, the bad guys in there, but to actually see them on the screen and how cool they looked, yeah, those are definitely going to blow up. So that's definitely cool. All right. So again, I appreciate everyone hanging out. We've been here for again about an hour or so. Appreciate everyone here.
Yeah.
Next week could be on Shelby's channel. If you're watching the replay, I'll have the link up there. So make sure you click over to there. We're talking about newsstands versus direct. So again, that's going to be the big one everyone wants to talk about on there.
Yeah, when we first started this channel and we were going through some of the topics, that was probably, we were getting emails. I mean, I was getting emails about, are you going to cover this? Because a lot of people know my view.
Thank you, Tim.
And I'm not going to say that it's positive towards some of the prices that we see with newsstands. And so I finally get an opportunity. I crunched some numbers. I showed the numbers to Jeff. Him and I talked about them back and forth. And so I think you're going to be really illuminated a bit by understanding these numbers when we talk about the rarity of a newsstand versus a direct comic. And you'll just have to tune into next episode to, find out what that, what that is. But like I said, I think you'll be really, really surprised when you start looking at the numbers. When we do start talking about the history a bit, because I owned a comic book shop between 1988 to 1993. So for 5 years there. So I have a pretty good insight of the direct versus the newsstand market at that time. so yeah, I think you're going to be really surprised. I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm going to change anybody's minds, or
we're just going to present a couple different sets of numbers. You make
Yeah.
up your mind on that.
Yeah.
We're not going to
That's
spit
all
out
it
the
is.
same normal stuff, but
yeah, that's all it is. You know, I just want to show you guys some real numbers of what we're talking about here in terms of rarity, and really, what does rarity mean? You know, I know that Jeff and I have been kind of loosely using the less than 5% as maybe a denotation of rarity. You know, we talked about with Mark Jewelers as, you know, less than that 5% print run.
right.
You talked about that with the Whitmans tonight of less than 5%. So if we're at least using that as a criterion of rarity, you know, I mean, but then again, some people could say, well, 20% is considered rare. I mean, I don't know. That's up for you to decide,
Right.
Of where that percentage falls to then be considered rare. I mean, you know, because there's not a true definition out there or anything, right?
Personal preference of what you think is going to be rare. Is 20% rare? I mean, that's pretty low. If you got 80% that's out there and 20% that isn't, that could be rare. You know, that means with the 5% that we're talking about, that should be uber rare, and that should be through the roof. So
Right.
we'll talk all about that. You know, we'll have a great show with that. I appreciate you guys, you know, liking and hitting the like button.
Oh yeah, hit that like button.
Yeah, telling everyone else about it. We're trying to build up the community here. You know, we're gonna be having some people on talk about this. You know, I started a show on Sundays, every other Sunday, where I'm interviewing different people from the comic community, just to sharing their knowledge and expertise and passion about some other things that are kind of comic adjacent, you know, that we can kind of talk about it. Again, we just want to support everyone. So again, appreciate everyone here. And we'll definitely see you next week over on Shelby's.
Yes, come check us out next week. Be sure and sub up and hit that like, subscribe, hit that notifications bell on both our channels so you'll know exactly when it is we're going to be dropping these. And, you know, you can set a little timer to give you a reminder an hour before, so that way you can have your dinner eaten and all the kids locked away and, you know, come check us out.
Yeah. And then on Sunday, this Sunday, the second Samurai Sunday auction over on Wild Comics. So we'll have that link up there as well. So check out Wild Comics. You know, I'll be there with a few other people. That's a lot of fun, a lot of giveaways, and a lot of great deals. If you see his last video, now there's some fire given away for really cheap.
Oh my God. I picked up some books. I mean, I'll admit it is I picked up some books, and Jeff, I really hope you did not tune in Saturday to the auction, because I ended up flipping a few of those.
I saw.
So I kept the ones I wanted, you know, and I was honest. It's like, well, this is the one I really wanted out of there, but you know, so yeah, definitely take advantage of that. Oh, speaking of auctions, this Saturday, Gorilla Todd is not having an auction. Okay. He's going to take the night off. He's going to go to what do they have there in Las Vegas? WCF, where they're in the octagon beating each other.
Oh, UFC.
UFC. Yeah. So Todd's going to UFC match. I'm going to an Astros game with some friends of mine. But what we're going to do is this Wednesday, Gorilla Todd will have an auction. So I'll be there, Sands Group, and I think Beta Ray Bill is going to be there too. Gorilla is always looking for other people that may want to come in on the auction. So Jeff or anybody else interested in joining in, definitely contact Gorilla Todd. But remember, Gorilla Todd's auction will be this Wednesday instead of Saturday. So,
all right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you later.
All right.